Hey, everybody, I'm Troy Rafferty, the People's Voice, and welcome to our podcast. I have the distinct privilege of having the legendary Michelle Snow on my show to talk about all things fun, relevant, controversial, just about anything. But it's a privilege. It's a privilege and an honor. Everybody who's watching out there know that Michelle is a legend nationwide. She comes from Pensacola. And she has just accomplished so much in her career and in her life, and it's just a privilege to have you on, Michelle.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to catch up with you.
Yes, yes. So I want to talk a little bit. So on the People's Voice, we do talk about some things. We try to be a little current. We try to be a little fun. I want to talk a little bit about your career. I mean, my gosh, you know, drafted in the first round back in what 2002 into the WNBA. You were legendary in that. But talk a little bit about what got you into professional sports. What was the biggest driving force that you had that made you want to do that? Because you have you have graduate degrees, you're a motivational speaker, you're an author, you're all these things. What was it about professional sports that drove you?
To be honest, it was what drove me to professional sports that actually is the correct way that I see it. For me, my community, a lot of things happened within my community right there in my hometown of Pensacola, Florida, where I was born and raised. Parents, and some of it was something that we did every Sunday. Our family had what we call, in the Black community, we love those soul food Sundays where you have 50, 60 family members over. It's loud, it's fun. And afterwards, a lot of the family members would go play basketball. And I'm a daddy's girl. So whatever daddy's doing, I'm trying to do. All the ladies are like cheering the men on. I'm running up and down the court, like trying to keep up with grown men on a basketball court. I'm like 3, 4 years old. And, of course, they come and they sit me down with them, and I'm going to run back out there. And that kind of got me into sports, is seeing how I brought the entire family together, how supportive we were of each other. And you always knew that you had people by your side. And later on, around probably somewhere between 8 and 11, my mom got sick with lupus. We didn't know at the time what it was.
Mm.
So I just saw her health deteriorating, and it made me want to, one, become a doctor. So I went into the health academy at Pensacola High School. And I also realized that I went from 5'5" to 6'5" in one summer.
One
Between my
summer.
one summer,
I
everyone
wish
is kind
I wish
of
I wish I wish I could have done that.
exactly. So 5'5" to 6'5" between my eighth and ninth grade year. And the crazy part was I didn't have jumper's knee. Most people who grow that fast, they have issues with their joints, their knees, knee pain. None of it. I don't know what it was. This was just meant to be for whatever reason. I saw this as a way to pay for my education so that I could actually figure out, every kid wants their parents to be okay. So I'm like, I'm going to figure out a cure for my mom. And that was kind of what drove me to throw everything I had into basketball, understanding that I had an advantage with the height, but I had to put the skill sets behind it and the discipline behind it to actually make the most of it and maximize my potential. Seeing the 96 Olympics when the ladies won in Atlanta, Georgia, and the announcement of the WNBA that started in 1997, that is my junior year of high school. I knew at this point everything was kind of falling together, and it could lead me to something really special. And it could make basketball special, but it could also take care of my family and make sure my mother had what she needed as well. And to be honest, there were so many people in the community that made sure that my mom, who was an educator, who was now, fighting for her health, a lot of people stepped up to make sure, one, that I got my grades. I got kicked off the freshman year. I went from an A to an F in Latin, which, is the basis of the medical community. And my dad told me, take that uniform back. We won't have any dumb athletes in this house. So all of the foundational elements were being put in place to create that internal motivation to drive me and to teach me what it took. But I have to give my community and my family that love and that respect for getting me there and keeping me on track.
Well, and that's one of the things that I talk about a lot in terms of sports because I try to do what I can in whatever way I can to help youth sports because I look back on my life and I'm sure you're the same way and tell me if you are, but I look back on my life and I think about my favorite memories as a child. And you're right, it is. It's like I remember laying on the floor of my grandma and grandpa's cottage listening to Ernie Harwell call a Detroit Tigers baseball game on the transistor radio, eating Jiffy Pop popcorn. and But they were just, sports is so important for communities, as you said, for families. It brings people together. It gives us something to root for the kids. It gives kids something to learn how to win with grace, lose with dignity, and all of those types of important things. And you've just been, obviously you've had just an incredible career. But talk a little bit. So, and one thing I got to say, I read an article a while back when I was thinking about you and I wanted to get you on the show, and I got to ask this question right up front. We'll get to Tennessee and all of those kind of things, and I'm not a Tennessee fan, but that's okay.
We'll get you. Don't worry, we will get you.
I'm a Michelle Snow fan, so it doesn't matter. But so you were asked a question that was, if you could be a superhero, who would you be? Do you remember what your answer to that was?
Mighty Mouse.
Mighty Mouse. Which for someone with a 7'1" wingspan, I thought was very interesting. So tell me about that. Tell me where that answer came from.
The answer came from being 5'5" and being the point guard of the team. And realizing how small I was, tiny. And then even as I had the growth spurt, one of the things people often forget is when you think about a center playing basketball, you're thinking about someone built like a Shaquille O'Neal back when I played. Mm-hmm. There weren't Kevin Durant's. I was before my time. Yeah. So in terms of Mighty Mouse, it was when you think about all the injuries, all the things that I've broken, my C5, C6 being taken out of my spine. It's part of it is I'm very small and I'm thin. I have a thin frame. So it doesn't take much if I get hit by someone that's pretty big to kind of take me down. So I would always see it as Mighty Mouse. I have to be faster. I have to jump higher. I have to be more agile, yoga, things like that. And it was also understanding that although at the time it was more the cornbread post players, like the boxier built post players, that's where the game was. Mm-hmm. Think about Bill Lambiers and the people who were dominating on the men and the women's side. They were the big huskier players. Rebecca Lobo at UConn. They weren't small and thin like myself. So one of the hardest parts for me was mentally overcoming everyone's labels of who I would be and what I could do. And I think we all face that. Even as a lawyer, I'm sure you had people who told you can't do this. This isn't your area of expertise. And they try to box you in. And for me, Mighty Mouse was kind of like, he had that little cape on.
Well, I like that. I like Mighty Mouse. I grew up watching Mighty Mouse, and of course, I just never had the growth spurt. So
that part.
I'm still just the mouse. So
that part. But I want to think like him, though.
Talking about overcoming obstacles in your career and in your life, which you have. Tell me a little bit about that, because at one point you were told if you went to Tennessee, you weren't going to play. Isn't that right?
Very much so. It seems like everything I've tried to do, that's kind of been the first reaction from some people, but I also see it as a blessing, because for me, they were telling me what I had to overcome. It's like, okay, tell me what the obstacle is. And one thing my mother always taught us, don't worry about what the problem is. The what doesn't matter. That's none of your business. The only thing you concern yourself with is how. And if you focus all of your energies on how do I win this case? How do I learn these plays? How do I overcome being, I was sometimes 40, 60 pounds lighter than these other players. How do I do that? And I think when you teach yourself to think creatively like that, you find the solutions. Okay, I'm sprinting with the point guards because I'm so thin. I can make the same sprint times as them. These post players are barely making it. You have to sprint from rim to rim so that you can get them out of the game. You have to get them winded. You have to take away what is their strength. Their body and their power is their strength. Take it away by being faster. Jump higher than them, get around them. And I started thinking about that. So when it came to Tennessee, it was kind of like this team just won 3 national championships back to back to back. And people were telling me, you're coming from a small town. What makes you think that you're going to go there and play? Their center is returning. I looked at it at the opposite way. Every time you level up, you get humbled and you got to go back to the bench like a rookie.
Yeah.
All right, LaShonda Stevens is the starting center. She's won 3 national championships. I'm going to go and learn from her for a year. Learning from her and stepping back for a year will excel me because she's one of the top centers in the country. This is one of the top programs, the top coaches.
So you were able to set your ego aside essentially, and say I'm going to learn. I'm gonna learn. But where did you get your drive? Like what was it? Was it spiritual based? Was it family? Was it what was it? What is it that made you get up in the morning and say, I am going to play at Tennessee. I am going to be, one of the first few people to ever dunk a basketball, in college. What is it that drives you or well, we're going to talk about what drives you now, because I know you've been doing incredible work. But what drove you back then?
Don't tell me what I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
That will set a fire under me unlike anything you have ever seen. I don't need sleep, water, or food when you tell me I can't do something. Everything just goes into, how do I prove them wrong? How do I figure this out? And I remember when I was a young kid, I watched a video about Will Smith, and he said he would write down every time someone told him he couldn't do something. And I started doing the same thing before every game. Anytime I didn't want to get out of bed, anytime I wanted to sleep in, that list was sitting right there. And I refused to let someone tell me who I am.
See, that's an important message for the young people out there that are going to be watching this video. Is don't let people. I've had people tell me I couldn't do things all my life. Most of the time it was but like I had a cross country coach who told me I'd never make the team, and so I got up every morning for like 6 months and ran that track. And ran it. And I don't exactly have a classic cross-country build. But he told me I would never. He said, you'll never make the team. So I made it. And the best time I ever had was he came up and he said, well, I got to tell you, Troy, I'm impressed. You made the team. And I said, I wouldn't be on your team if you paid me to be on this team. I said, I just wanted to show you that you shouldn't tell kids that, because it's important, and everybody draws motivation from different things, whether it's family, whether it's spiritual, whatever it is. I tell people all the time as a trial lawyer, I keep notes by my bed. One of the notes I say is, wake up, your enemy is sleeping. And that drives me. And it sounds like you've been able to, throughout your entire incredible career, been able to find that motivation that you can dig into, that has been so successful for you. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Talk about a little bit about because you do such incredible work. I watched you be inducted into the Florida Hall of Fame in 2018. The Florida Sports Hall of Fame. You gave an incredibly motivational and inspiring speech that I remember to this day. It was really incredible. You're an incredible motivational speaker. You help so many people. Talk about what it is what is driving you right now. What are you working on, and what is your focus right now?
Couple of things I'm working on now, working on the business stuff and building up the speaking business. That is a passion. That is if I could do anything every day, that would be it. Because it's kind of like you said, that moment when you went back to that track coach and you told him, I made it. and I don't want to be on your team. I want to teach you a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Stop telling people what they can't do. For me, I was that kid that was told that over and over again. And I made a promise. I used to pray all the time. If you help me get out of this situation, I promise I'm going to go back and get as many people as I can and inspire them. Because I know what it's like to walk up to a pro athlete and ask for an autograph and they shrug you off. I know what it's like to be told you're not good enough, that you won't make the team. Oh, oh, you're an athlete, but I also know what it's like to be told you're so articulate. And I go, that's kind of backhanded truth.
I didn't expect you to be so articulate.
Wait, what? I'm not supposed to know English and I'm in America. There's so many different things that you learn. And I go, the league was just starting, so it was in its infancy. And there is no blueprint for how to get there. And especially as a young Black woman, how do I show other young women that it's more than just entertainment and sports? So I took a few years off and I went into corporate America and I became a product line manager here at Nike. And that's what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. So now I'm also taking the learnings from a Fortune 500 company globally that's been over 50 years of success. And I'm taking that and applying it to the motivational businesses and to all the things that I'm doing on the side so that I can still continue to pour into my communities and control that and be able to show people like, I know they're telling you you're not good enough. Okay, well, sleep less. Get up.
Get up.
Put the video game aside. Discipline yourself. You can still play the video game, but I need you to get up. Like you said, you got up every morning. Coach Davis had us up at every morning at 5 a.m. running 5 miles with only one rule. I don't care how slow you run. I don't care how long it takes. You better not walk. If you walk, you start over. You might jog as slow as you can. And by the time I got to Tennessee, I was in such great shape from doing that. Just something so simple that we didn't even have to do preseason anymore.
Well, let's talk about that and overcoming some of these things. Let's talk for a second. There's a lot of controversy about the disparity in pay between female athletes and male athletes,
Yes.
and there has been for many years. So, talk to me a little bit about that and how you deal with that and how you worked through that, because it's a real issue. I mean, it's kind of funny in corporate America. It's like, it's everywhere. Let's just face it. It's just everywhere. And so, but it's very, very prominent in, for example, women's soccer versus men's soccer, women's basketball versus men's basketball, all these different sports. So how did you wrestle with that mentally, psychologically, to be able to still stay mentally focused?
I think it was really simple for me for one reason. The first thing you have to understand is, what conversation are you having? And when I say that, I'll go, well, if you look at corporate America, women are getting 78 cents on the dollar. It's no different in corporate America. It's the exact same conversation. It's now when you take it to sports, I find it so ironic that the conversation is being compared to the men's pay. But when you're having that conversation, people think they're saying, oh, if I'm dunking and LeBron's dunking, we should be making the same amount of money, or I should be making millions too. That is not what the conversation is. That's not what the women are saying at all. They're saying that if we're looking at things from, let's step into the GM shoes of the team and the ownership level. Okay, as a GM, we're bringing in 60 million. Typically on an NBA team, there's a certain percentage that goes to the players. What the women are saying is, why aren't those percentages the same when we're out of the black? We came out of the black in 20 years. It took them 40. We're doing it a lot faster. So it isn't give me the same check that LeBron is getting. It's the same percentage based on how well the league is doing revenue-wise. And a lot of people, when you see, if you Google WNBA pay, the first thing you'll see is, and I will say, we're all ignorant at something. We all are. We don't know everything. The ignorance is that I'm definitely, but the ignorance is, people will be on there interviewing players and taking things that they say out of context and saying, oh, she's saying they should be paid like the men. And that's not what anyone is saying. We're in those CBA and those players meetings with our players reps and all of those things. What we're saying is the percentages should be the same. Like, why is one league keeping more money for themselves, but the players are the ones that are doing the work, the endorsements, this and that? Why can't that gap be compensated? Or, let's have a discussion around those things. You're getting better media deals and things like that. The players should also be compensated off of all of that revenue as well. That's the actual conversation. But it's an entertainment league. So the salacious story sounds better. You want to be paid the same as the men. And don't get me wrong, I think you need that too. One thing Pat said is media, whether good or bad, is still free media.
So let's take a little bit, take a little advice from your mother, and it's how. It's not what is the problem. The problem is that it's not fair. It's just not. But the question then becomes, based on your mother's advice, the question is to focus on how. How do we fix this? How do we fix this as a society and as people and as communities? We ought to try to figure out what, always be trying to improve. So how do we fix it?
One of the things a lot of the players are doing is we're going into corporate America, getting the information, learning what it takes to be in those roles, and then coming back and getting them. When you look at the aces, Nikki Fargas that I played with at Tennessee, I know you don't like us, so I won't be petty with that.
I should have worn my Notre Dame hat.
I'm down.
I do have a picture I'm going to show. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I got a picture I'm going to show you and I when we were watching the Tennessee Notre Dame game.
Oh, yes.
In Pensacola. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Oh, no problem. But it's, first off, if you're passionate about the league and you care about it, go into jobs, get the training, understand how things work behind the scenes. And then you start to get yourself in positions where you actually have the power. Because one of the things I tell a lot of people is many of the people in this conversation have no power or influence to change a thing. So you're talking to the wrong person. That's the first problem. The second one, let's find players who love this and get them in those roles. And I believe that is already happening across the league. When you look at coaches, GMs, players, all of that, even ownership. You have players who now have ownership within the WNBA itself as well. That is where the change occurs. And so I think always having that growth mindset to learn and understand, that's where it comes from. And when my mother said how, I would leave practice and go upstairs and go into the operational meetings. I would sit with them. Dr. Sheila Johnson, who owned BET, also owned the Mystics. I would want to sit there and get as much information from them as possible. Because one thing I'll tell you is if you're the player on the basketball court, you're the weakest piece, you're the pawn. Mm-hmm. Your salary is written off. It is a tax write-off.
That's a good point.
King and the queen, that's the owner, the sponsorships that they're living off of. It's understanding how, when you think about sports, what the true chessboard is and what each piece represents. And once you do that, now you can create a plan to actually influence where things go in the future.
So do you see yourself going into some of those positions? Obviously, you've got a very successful career. You're at Nike. You're doing all these great things, motivational speakers, author. But so what do you see in terms of your role going forward in terms of professional women's sports?
For me, my role is I want to be that person that's behind the scenes. I want to be the stage. It's one of the things when I interviewed with Nike and they were like, the stage. That's what you want to be? I was like, that's the role I want to be. I want to be the stage. I've been on the stage. I've had the spotlight. I understand. I did everything I was supposed to do in that pawn position. But you don't really see the king and the queen as often on that chessboard. They're behind the scenes, making everything move. They have pieces in place. I want to be that person that now brings in that next young player and says, hey, listen, you have a brand. You are a business. How do we monetize this so that your career, which is usually only 3 to 5 years. I played 16 years. Most careers, men or women's, it is 3 to 5 years professionally, which means you got to take that money.
I would have never guessed that. Michelle.
Yes, because we think about the greats who played forever.
Right.
Like Father Time, LeBron.
Right.
But most players, they only play 3 to 5 years. And most players are not going to be a max player. So I tell them, hey, as a max player, here's some of the things I did. Here's what we did with other players. Here are some of the endorsements and brands and initiatives you need to align yourself with so that you can maximize your opportunities. Should you go back to school? Should you start a business? That depends on that individual person's dreams and goals. So the first part is figuring out what they really want. And once I figure that out, then we're going to map out a plan for them. And I call it just a little signature program that we run where we walk you through, hey, if this is what you want to do and this is where you see yourself, how do we get you there? How is the biggest question? Okay, we have a Rolodex of people that we have access to as pro athletes. Let's start making those connections. Let's figure out how you can get back to the community at the same time. And once we have all of your pieces on that chessboard, now let's talk about how to maximize this opportunity long term. I think a lot of people are very short-sighted in terms of where they are and what they're doing. You got to play the long game and be 3 steps ahead. What are other players doing? What is their value? What is your value? In the marketplace, on and off the court. You have to know both. What is the lifespan? How are you built as a player? Are you a player that can play a long time? Are you one that it'll take you a very long time to come back from injuries? You have to look in the mirror and have a very realistic conversation with yourself. And it's a very hard one because sometimes you have to look in that mirror. I remember when I broke my foot, ran through my savings, paying my siblings' tuitions. And there were many different things I was trying to do, starting a real estate company. And it was hard because if I don't hurry up and get back off of this foot injury, the money's gone and my position may be gone. So it's so many different things that people have to take into account. And one of the biggest things I tell them is start with understanding that you have to become the bank before you start taking care of everybody else. Figure out what your brand plan is. What is your business? How do we make this a bank so that you have passive income streams coming in every single month so that if you get hurt or something happens, you're not sweating it. That's where the books and the programs and this motivation, that's where all of that stuff came from. And then I just found things that I love just as much as basketball. And I just started building a plan around those.
So I guess for everybody out there that's listening, because, very few people and certainly very few athletes are able to reach the levels that you reached in the WNBA. And, I think it's important to send a message, and I don't know what it is. I'm going to ask you what that message is, to kids who have to reinvent themselves. Because a lot of kids in high school, for example, I do a lot of work with prep athletes, and the question is, how do so few make it in professional sports. You were able to do it. But what is the message to how you reinvent yourself once you realize, listen, I always joke around, and I realized when my hockey coach told me to go out and get in a fight with this, number 22 on the other side of the team because he was their best player. And I said, well, but if I do that, then I'm going to be off the ice too. And he goes, yeah, I'm okay with that, Troy. And so I always joke.
Strategy.
So at that moment, I realized that maybe my professional hockey career was not going to take off. But, so you've reinvented yourself over and over. I mean, obviously you played for, years and years in the WNBA, but then afterwards you had to branch out, reinvent yourself. Kids right now are facing a lot of that stuff, those issues once they realize they might have been a prep star, they might have been a high school all-star and all that kind of stuff, but they're not going to make it in professional sports. I don't want to tell people they can't. What I'm saying is, psychologically, how have you reinvented yourself? And number two, what would you tell students in that situation?
2 things. It's a chessboard. You might not make it as the pawn, but why would you want to? The pawn that's you can make it as the coach. There are coaches who have never played. Mm-hmm. That are training and teaching. There are trainers. There's so many areas of the business that you could go into. We now have something that is blowing up, which was digital marketing, social media. I have people who played who knew their career wouldn't be professional, but they were like, hey, can I come into the operational meetings with you? Can I start to see what they're doing on the social media side? Can I intern so that when I finish out with school, I can cover, I'm still in sports. I'm still where I love to be. I'm just in a different facet of the business. So the first thing I tell people is there's an array of things that you can do within any given industry. The key is figuring out what is your passion, what do you love, and I tell people this, if you're not willing to lose sleep over it, it's not a passion. If someone saying something to hurt your feelings stops you, that's not your passion. Mm-hmm. Your passion is something that every day you wake up, there's no one and nothing that can stop you. You put a mask on. When I'm on the court, there are no smiles. I don't have anything to smile about. I'm here to work. And that's all I come. I come with that mindset and that mentality. And I tell people the biggest part, whether it's sports or business, is if you don't have this right here where it needs to be, you're done already. Mm-hmm. You're done. I don't care how big, how strong, it doesn't matter. I've had games I've had to play while getting a phone call that someone's passed away that I care about. Mm-hmm. I've had to bury people and then turn around and have teams tell me to hurry up and get back because the season's about to start. Like, there are some things that make you question whether your character is off or not, and if your priorities are in the right place. Missing Thanksgiving and Christmas because while everyone's with their family and friends, we're on the television, or I'm overseas across the way in different places where I may or may not be safe. It's doing this right here and saying that at the end of the day, I tell people this: if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not your passion. It's not what you should be doing.
I like that. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that from you, just so you know.
Take it. If your why doesn't make you cry, you're not in the right spot. And that's what you have to figure out. What are you willing to do anything for?
Well, because you, separate and apart from your incredible career in professional sports, you are an incredible entrepreneur, business person, and as I've mentioned a couple times already, author, inspirational speaker, all those things. And, I think that's an important message for the children to hear is it's not just how long you're, it's the commitment, and that's why you were so successful, but it's also the commitment. What sports taught you, it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but the commitment that you had in sports has carried over into your entire life. And you're committed to, whether it be helping young people, whether it's doing, being a motivational speaker, whether it's being an author, entrepreneur, everything. And it sounds like, that's one of the things that I think is important for children to learn and know, is that you're learning lessons in life when you make that commitment. Like, I learned that commitment with the story that I told you about my cross-country coach. It taught me a lesson. It taught me a life lesson that I can now use as a lawyer, that you can use as a business person, that you can use as an entrepreneur, and all of the things. And so I think that's one of the biggest messages for young kids out there, young people, is it's not just about whether you make it to the bigs, whether you make it to the NBA, the WNBA, whatever. It's about the lessons that you're taught in that regard.
You just hit it on the head for one reason. People keep it to sports, and I go, it's beyond sports. For one reason, when you look across corporate America, at one point, more than 78% of CEOs play sports. Not professionally, just period. Mm-hmm. Sports teach you character. They teach you how to work with other people. They teach you how to lead teams, leadership skills. There are so many skill sets that translated from the court to corporate America that it was simple for me to come into Nike and be a product line manager, where what am I doing? I'm sitting there and I'm managing cross-functional partners and bringing them together in a way so that we can take an idea of a shoe and take it from idea to store shelf. Yeah. And in order to do that, there's a process to it. It's a playbook. Is that not what we use in sports? Mm-hmm. Is it not understanding that, okay, if this is the basketball court, here are the plays, here are the tools and the pieces, each player that we have on their hockey field, and you're on that ice and your coach is saying, take someone out. Same thing happens on the basketball court. Mm-hmm. We have that player that is the intimidator. You have it on the football field, the bruiser. Is that person that their value is in being able to take out the best player. Look at Dennis Rodman. He did it for years. Right. And it's understanding that you don't have to go to the professional levels or the college. It could be high school, it could be intramural, but the things that you're learning from sports, the character, the skill sets, they can take you anywhere you want to go. The issue is having the discipline to stick with sports when it's fun and when it's not, when you're still trying to, like you said, make the team. So I got to get up on my own and go discipline myself.
Well,
That is the drive and the motivation that you have to get.
and there's competition. I think that's another message for a lot of our young people is life is a competition.
Hey,
Life is a competition, whether you're in corporate America, whether you're in real estate, whether you're
yes.
a trial lawyer. I mean, I get up, and like I said, I keep notes on my bed, especially, in saying, on the bedside, I said, get up, your enemy's asleep, so you're going to get an advantage. I don't mind giving up sleep so that I can go try my cases. I love it. In fact, I barely sleep because I love it, and I learned a lot of that through my history in sports, and so it's been, and it sounds like that's exactly what you've done, and that's why you've become the success that you are. So let me ask you this now, and I don't know what you feel about this. We never had a chance to talk about it, but this new phenomenon of name, image, likeness. What are your thoughts on whether this is good for sports, whether it's bad for sports, whether it's good for kids, and whether or not it's whether it's hurting sports? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? If you have any, I don't know.
I have a few.
Well, I do know you well enough to know that you have thoughts on just about everything.
But the first, I wanted to go back to what you said before when you were talking about what sports teaches you. One thing people didn't realize is I wasn't a big Tennessee fan growing up either. I didn't even know who Pat Summitt was playing basketball. I had no clue. Pat got me to go to Tennessee by saying this about competition. She said, you can go to any other school and they'll give you what you want. You don't have to go to class. You can do whatever you want to do. And because of your basketball skills, they will push you through. And she said, but I've seen your mother. You're not really the type that wants to be pushed through. You want to actually know how to do it. She said, if you come here, you're going to hate me for 4 years. I was like, that is probably the worst pitch I ever heard. Okay. Like, is that your pitch to me? Is it make me work harder?
Michelle, I will make your life miserable for 4 years.
Miserable for 4 years. But she said this, but I promise you this. When you come out, you will be in the biggest and the best position to go professional because you will be in a place where you won't be the biggest fish in a small pond. You will have to fight your butt off every single day against people that are just as good and or better than you for 4 years. So when you get through dealing with that type of competition every single day in practice, I promise you everyone else will be easier. And you'll have a skill set, a mindset. We're going to transform all of those different components so that you don't worry about all of that. She's like, you're worried about people saying you're not big enough or strong enough. She said, the only problem I see is that you're a mental midget. I was like, this has to be the worst pitch I have ever heard, ever. And she took out a piece of paper and she just put on the side. She was like, we got 2 national championships. She's like, we're winning this year, 3. I was like, oh, and she's sitting there. She said, we got 18 Olympians. We have this many people in the WNBA now. Like she went down the list. She said, oh, and we're the only school in the country with 100% graduation rate. And she said, and that means you will be in the first 3 rows and you will not miss a class. Now I'm looking at her like, this just doesn't sound fun anymore. I went home and I thought about what she said.
I just wanted to play basketball.
Wait, I didn't want to play. I thought about what she said and I was like, wow, she's telling me if I come in there every single day and fight my butt off, it won't be given to me. It's going to be earned, not given, that I'm going to be better for it. That's probably some of the best advice I have ever had given to me in the most dramatic way. Because I was just like, really? She really just thinks, but she was right. She was like, if you compete like this every day against the very best, what does that make you?
Well,
you will become one of.
Sounds like she was a big influence on you.
She was. She taught us to play. She taught us not only to understand the playbook, but to understand how to create your own on the court and to be a coach on the court and empowered you to do so, to make second decisions. So it was almost like you were becoming a little replica of her on the court. And I tell people, if you're willing to put yourself in situations where you have to walk in a room, like when I went in those operational meetings, I didn't speak because I was probably I definitely wasn't the smartest person in the room. I shouldn't have been in the room. So I just sat
I
for
doubt, no, I doubt
months.
that. I
Oh,
doubt that.
I promise you, my first year at Nike, you can ask anyone I worked with, I didn't speak. I would sit in the meetings and I would just do this. I don't understand how Nike works. I'm not going to come in here telling you how to run your company and I don't know. I sat quiet for about 9 months. And when I started speaking was when I understood how everything worked and how every answer, how that would affect how the flow of things went for the company. And I was like, that's one of the best things. And actually, Fred was the one who told me that. He's like, sometimes you got to walk in a room and just be silent. We know Fred was never silent,
Fred was
but,
never.
he
Fred
gave me
was never
advice,
quiet.
but I never saw it. But he was like, sometimes you just got to walk in that room and just pay attention. You got to be more prepared. And sometimes preparation comes from just learning, immersing yourself, being obsessed with observation. And that's one of the things I did here at Nike as well. It's one of the things I did on every team I went to in my first year is I would just sit and watch. My teams would tell you I didn't speak. I didn't talk much. Once I learned the ropes, I would take that next group of rookies underneath me and try to teach them the same thing. Like, don't come in here telling them you've never played in the WNBA. You don't know how it works. You don't understand it. Close your mouth, pay attention, and then ask the right questions once you have some information.
Well, so let's talk about that just for a second, and then I'm not gonna let you off the hook. You're gonna answer my name, image, and likeness question.
I got you. I got you.
But talking about that, I always say one of my mentors was always saying, "You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you speak, because when you're speaking, you're just telling people what you already know. When you're listening, you might actually learn something." And so I try to abide by that. But in terms of dealing with some of the things like when you're sitting there in corporate America, I mean, let's just throw it out there. I mean, you're a black female in a world that is dominated by people who don't look like you. And so, how do you maintain? Because one of the things I've always admired about you is your positivity. Like you are always positive. Look at that. Look at that. You're smiling right now. You're always positive, even when I talk about the fact that as a black woman in corporate America, how do you maintain the positivity to continue on and be the success that you have become?
I'll be honest. I love working out because it allows me to release that stress and that tension. I meditate. And I was a person who, when meditation was first becoming popular, I was like, what is that old crazy stuff? People crazy. What are they doing? What do you mean you visualizing your future? And it sounds bananas. And then I was on the Olympic team right before I broke my foot and didn't make the team. And all of them were sitting in the locker room and they were doing meditations and visualizing. And you got people who are on the court that are like, we're going nuts. And they're in the locker room and it's completely quiet. And all you hear is everyone's eyes are closed, headphones are on. And we went into this place. It was some type of sleep place where they put you to sleep. They put all the stuff on you and you're dreaming. Mm-hmm. And you know that when you're dreaming, your body and your mind doesn't know the difference. So you can literally train yourself and teach yourself anything you want to teach yourself through meditation. So we were visualizing how we would play, what we would do when things were wrong, how we would react. And I began to see it. When I saw Olympians doing it, I realized that I was the dumbest in the room again and that maybe I should look into this. And I started meditating. Now, it took me forever to quiet my head, to quiet my mind from all the things that people would say, the notebooks where I'd be writing down what motivated me. And eventually I just learned to quiet my mind and I would go into this place where, they say it's like the white light in the tunnel and you can't see anything else. And all I would see was the end game. So it made it easier to forget mistakes. It made it easier to ignore the comments from the crowd when people are screaming and yelling, you're not good. You got 3 fouls. We're going to file you out. Like whatever it was, even in corporate America, my personal, my private life, I think being able to quiet my mind, go on long walks, exercising. Like I love boxing is what I'm into right now.
Oh,
I'm like, okay,
boxing. Wow, really?
I need to learn some self-defense. So I'm into boxing now, and it's something different. I was doing tennis
I
before.
promise you got a longer reach than most of the people you're boxing
I
against.
do. I do.
That helps with
And
the
I use
jabs.
it to my advantage. But it's just also keeping myself in a place where I'm always learning new things, number one, and where I'm learning to quiet my mind and giving myself something to focus on. And as long as I do that, I usually am able to kind of keep myself centered. And I think if you can keep yourself centered, you're fine because life is hard. You just got to choose your heart. And my thing is, if it's going to be hard, I at least want to be the sunshine in somebody's day. Like I
Oh,
want to be that person that they know is going to make them smile or, give them a takeaway. If the glass is half full or half empty and I get to choose which one it is, it's half full, period.
yeah.
And that's just what it
Yeah,
is.
I got to tell you, I'm stealing all sorts of your sayings from this. From this, I like that. So let's shift just for a second to the
Mhm,
name, image, and likeness.
mhm.
What are your thoughts about this? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it um, or is it just is?
Listen, Troy, you're a lawyer. I'm an athlete. We could have made a lot of money when I was at Tennessee Duncan Bay because they make some money off of me. I think every time I think about NIL, I think about that. I was like, oh my goodness, you would have been a multimillionaire in college. Like in
Yeah.
college,
Mm-hmm.
the difference you can make. Now imagine having that and coming from a family with which gives you that background of save 80, live off of 20. Oh, I would have been good. I would have been good. Everyone doesn't come from that environment though. And that is my biggest fear is NIL is an amazing. I think you should be paid for your name, image, and license. Why should you get to leverage me? That's exploitation. That's not okay. And these colleges are making a ton of money. And yes, you do get a free college degree. But once again, in terms of the revenue coming in, is that fair to just give off 1% and say, well, I mean, you are getting something? That I think there's some discrepancies there, and I'm glad to see these players getting paid because I had to work my way through college, and Pat didn't know it. And when she found out after we lost the championship game against UConn. Everyone's at her house crying, and they're like, "Where's Michelle? She doesn't care." Like da 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 da, and everybody's like, "Michelle at work." Michelle's at work. She got to send money home to her family. And Pat just looked shocked. And later, years later in her book, she would write, I was probably one of the few people that understood priorities, but that isn't something that's always taught. And if you put a ton of money in someone's hands, I also think these schools have the responsibility of teaching finances and making sure people understand like you have all this money. Here's how you can leverage this money to create those passive streams of income or at least get compound interest on your money in real estate. You're getting 8% on your money, something. I think that's the missing piece that bothers me. And that's also the part that inspires me to say, hey, let's create something, a program where we can start beginning to teach these kids very young that they are a brand. Because in middle school and high school, they need to understand that the things that they do, how they walk, how they talk, it matters. It matters. It can cost you a scholarship. And when you're thinking about an NIL, your name matters, your image matters, and it creates licensing opportunities that can change your family's destiny. And I think one, it's having the conversation, but posing it in that way so that kids understand it versus just telling them, oh, they got NIL, you're getting paid now, but not teaching them the backside of that so that we can build and make stronger communities where they're coming back and they're helping other kids learn. And everyone's starting to build a successful community of people. NIL is great. I think there are a few things that need to change, like I said, with the financial part, the financial component. Outside of that, there are some things that I wonder because I do see some things that are very heartbreaking with NIL as well. Like Don Staley and her team, and they can't get an NIL deal, and they're the darn champions. That's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous to me. And people will say, well, oh, no one wants to see blacks on this or blacks on that. And I'll go, really? We're the biggest consumer group. What are you talking about? Because if we're talking about marketing and money, that's the group you should be advertising to, if we're being honest. So I look at both sides of the coin and I wonder where NIL will progress, where it will go. And I think there are going to be some conversations kind of like the WNBA and the NBA pay gap that will come about from that. But there are conversations and dialogues that need to happen, because I think if you look at it honestly and truthfully, and we look at consumerism as a whole and the groups that spend the most money, I think some of those groups should also be compensated for their name, image, and licensing.
So let me ask you this. All right, we're gonna talk because that's very insightful, and I happen to agree 110% with you about that. But let's move. What was it like? How did it feel when you first dunked that basketball? What was going through your mind? Like, what was you had to be? I mean, you had to be pretty psyched up.
The crazy part is that's not even what it was.
What's that?
Nobody knows that's actually not what happened. I was on the court and I heard Pat was on the sideline, and I told you, she said she's gonna make my life hell for 4 years. She meant it. She's on the sideline, and I knew she was talking about me. She looked at one of my teammates and goes, "Go there," and I go, "Oh, here she comes." Oh man, I go, she about to take me out anyway. I'm going for it. So she was going to take me out for not denying the high post, which Pat is huge advocate of. You're going to deny the high post. So I was like, well, I'm late on the denial. I might as well go for the steal. So I used that 7'1" wingspan, smacked that ball loose, and I realized there was nobody between me and the basket. And I was like, she's going to take you out anyway. Go ahead and do your thing. And we're in Hawaii at the Maui Invitational.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, hey, you're in Hawaii. Go for it. And I remember I was like, you have nothing to lose. You're coming out of the game anyway. So I went up for it. I jumped and I just grabbed the rim, pulled myself on it to be extra dramatic, and just came off like, and Pat is just looking at me like, she's one of those people you're never going to get a reaction out of unless she wants to get one. So she's just like, We go into the locker room. The arena's going bananas. Everyone is losing their minds. We go into the locker room, and, everyone's cheering me on. Pat walks in, and she looks at me. Nice steal. And then nice steal. Doesn't say anything.
Doesn't say anything about the dunk? Nice steal.
Nice steal. That's why I tell people I think she's a master psychologist. She knew to congratulate, but to keep it where I was still kind of like, that's it. That's it. And it would lead to her drawing up a play to a bigger dunk on national television against Vanderbilt later on, and calling them out and saying, you got the balls to do it? And I was like, yeah. So, but that's just Pat. Like, she understands, like your first day there, you take the Myers-Briggs test, which is the psychological exam. So she knows your triggers. She knows where to motivate you. She knows where to not push you. She knew exactly what she was doing when she walked in that room and said that to me. And that I was still going to be in the second half like, that's not enough. Like, geez, what do I have to do? But she also knew that as long as she kept me focused, I was going to keep fighting and working. That's cool. Versus had she congratulated me, I might have thought I'd done enough. I'd made it, and the ego might have blown out of proportion.
Yeah, and you rest on your laurels then. Yeah.
That part. And that's, and we've all done it at one point in time. Sure. And she wanted to make sure that I didn't, but she also sent me a very important message in that moment. You don't ever rest on your laurels. Mm-hmm. And until that clock runs out, you don't stop, and you don't ever celebrate until you have reached that goal. And I was like, okay, I got it. But I also knew she was proud at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, I'm going to play a little game with you that I've played a lot of times in different restaurants and bar rooms, okay? Because you said you worked through college. All right, yes. So we're going to compare who had the worst job working their way through college.
I had the easiest job. I lose that one.
Well, what did you work?
I worked at McMillan's. McMillan's is a big sports store that's right on the main strip in Tennessee, right on campus. And honestly, I was sitting there while the customers were coming in, ringing them up while reading and studying at the same time. So I did not have a hard job.
Okay.
I think you're going to beat me on that. What did you have?
I worked at a sausage factory.
Oh yeah, you
Literally,
got
my job was to take the pig intestines and squeeze all the stuff out of it before
yeah,
it.
you got me
So
beat.
okay, so but anyway, well, listen, I'm gonna conclude because I've taken up more of your time than I deserve, and I know you're very busy. But one of the things I always ask is, what is if you had one piece of advice to you had the ability to go back in time, okay? And, I can look back on my life and say, I would tell my younger self this. I would say
Mhm.
that. We've all had hardships and tribulations and issues. What would be the one thing if you can go back in time to a young Michelle Snow and give some advice going forward?
Mm. I think the one piece that I would probably go back and tell myself is that everything that you dreamed, everything you said you would do, that people told you was crazy, that you'd make it to the WNBA, that you would get 17 scholarships, ended up with 150. I would go back and tell her, you're going to do every single thing you say. Dream bigger.
Wow, that's good advice. That's good advice. Well, listen, the legendary Michelle Snow, it's been just an absolute privilege to have you on the show. I always love visiting with you, and when you come back to Pensacola, if you don't reach out and make sure that we catch up, I'm gonna be very upset. so,
Got you. I got you.
but thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on all your successes, everything, and thank you for being the inspiration that you are to so many people. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All
I'll be back.
right. All right. Bye bye.